Hello and welcome to the Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Rosemary Brown, and I'm joined with Linda Pacewicz, who is an Access Partner for PHEAA. Linda, thank you very much for being here with us today. And we're going to talk in this segment of the show a lot about PHEAA and financials of children going off to college, the process of what's best for parents. So I think if you do have a child who's ready to go off to college, you're going to find this pretty interesting, this segment. So we only have a short period of time. Linda, tell me about your position and PHEAA, which we're familiar with, but maybe some people watching aren't.
Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency is a state agency that provides assistance with affording education and attending education. And so we're talking to families and students about career planning and how to afford it and what kind of forms to do to be ready.
And I'm very big on this, and some people watching may know this. I'm a big advocate for financial literacy and having our students know financially what they're getting into, and parents know what they're getting into, and just trying to make the best decisions you can with education on that. So part of what PHEAA does and part of what your position is and why we're even doing this segment is to really help people wrap their hands around how to do things, how to know what you can afford, how to know maybe if there's assistance for you, and just what you're looking at for the future. So let's say I have a child. What is ninth grade child? Where am I when I start to say I'm sending my kid to college and I know they want to go to college, even a trade school, whatever they may need? What do I do at that point? When is it too early? When is the appropriate time? When do I start doing things?
Well, it's never too early to start thinking about how am I going to afford college. But we would suggest in 9th or 10th grade to really be doing some career research. Figure out what do I like to do? Where am I headed? And even start visiting schools. It's never too early to go out there and see what's a fit for me, because schools come at all different costs and all different types. So it's up to the family to decide what's affordable for me, where can we go, and starting to narrow down what kind of career choices I'm interested in is a great option for younger students.
No, I talked to my daughter a little bit even about shadowing, job shadowing at a young age, so that you can start to see would I enjoy that career, would I not enjoy that, and that can happen through friends of family who have different jobs or different connections. But so you can start looking at colleges, you can start looking at that and looking at the price ranges that are currently out there, and they can change a little bit over a couple years. So is there a form or a place that they can start online? I know in my office here, thanks to PHEAA and to you as well, who always bring these by, we have some great booklets on the student guides and how to take a bite out of college, costs, and different things that parents can do. So step one, after you've kind of decided, you've looked around and you've seen some things, forms, where do I go as a parent to start doing some processes?
Well, it's helpful to continue to look for scholarships along the way, because that's always free money. And of course, there's never one place to find scholarships. You can just Google, don't pay anything. But once you start into the financial aid process and you're looking for federal funding or grants, which is free money, and PHEAA, we administer the state grant program as well. You can fill out a FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. And once your student is a senior in high school, that after January 1st, in the senior years, when you actually complete the FAFSA, and it will count. But if families wanted to play with the form or go out there, they can go at any time, and down in the right-hand corner, it's called a FAFSA forecaster, and they can become comfortable with the information that's being asked, or if they just want to see what it's all about, they can play with the form a little bit.
So if you want to get ahead of the game, like we said, 9th, 10th, 11th grade, you can play with that form and then look and be ready for that information. But January of the senior year is when that form takes 100%. That's when it really counts. So, and you mentioned something real quick in there about the scholarships, and I think this is important, because when people look and they research for scholarships, you never should pay for a scholarship service. So explain that real quickly so that people watching can understand that.
Well, scholarships are free money, and of course, like anything, there's always people that will take your money to process free forms, and that's okay, that's valid, but you don't have to pay. You can do all this yourself if you put the work into it. And I always tell students, 5 minutes while you're having your cereal in the morning, be online looking for scholarships, because students can start looking for that in kindergarten. There's scholarships actually out there for kindergartners and forward. As you get to be a junior or senior in high school, that's when it really counts, and that's where the majority of the scholarships are that are being awarded.
Is there a trick to that? Is there a trick to that to validate? You know, when you Google, a lot of things come up.
Yeah.
Is there something that would tell someone this really isn't a valid, legit scholarship. I mean, you have those scholarships that are $500, $1,000, $1,000, $1,000, $1,000, and they add up over time.
Just like coupons.
But because there's, like coupons, if there is so much out there on the internet, when you Google something, you say, boy, that's great, but how do you know if it's valid? Is there a way?
Well, it's really just researching a little bit and understanding. Of course, if it looks too good to be true, it usually is. However, if somebody's asking for a credit card or there's misspellings in the actual scholarship information, you do get on listservs once you start looking, and you'll get lots of information or emails sent to you. And just be careful like you would with anything, because, of course, there's lots of ads on scholarships, and that's okay. But when you're applying for a scholarship, they really shouldn't be asking you for a credit card.
Right, because they shouldn't be charging you at that point.
Exactly.
It's only some sort of company that's claiming to do work for you.
Correct.
To find these scholarships. But you can do this online yourself by Googling, and you should never pay to apply for a scholarship.
Right.
Okay, so that's rule number one. That's an important rule. I think that parents know. There's been different situations that people have said that they have paid for services for certain things. So now we're going to jump back a little bit.
Sure.
So now you fill out the FAFSA form your senior year.
It makes
January.
you eligible. That FAFSA will calculate your family's income, household size, different things about you to determine what age you might be eligible for. And of course, there's federal aid, and every school is different in how they handle it and what amounts how they distribute it to their students. But there's certain aid that is based fully on the FAFSA. So they complete this FAFSA, and that will determine, every student gets loans, but you have to complete a FAFSA to get it. But the grants and other free money is based on the cost of the school. So if you're going to a higher cost school, there's more aid to be available to you than, of course, a lower cost school, because there's other sources that will help. But the FAFSA is the driving factor, and the Pennsylvania grant form. We at PHEAA, we have a form we would like students to complete to see if you're eligible for any free money from the state.
Now that, it seems late for me if you have a student that says they want to go to Penn State, and they know that, and they're trying to make their decision, they're putting their applications in, but if they know that technically financially they can't afford that school, or it's not really a great choice for them based on the finances, January of the senior year, a lot of students already kind of know at that point, or will be having acceptance things coming in March. It seems a little bit late. So how do you get over that?
Well, deadlines are huge in financial aid. I'm glad you brought that up, because you have, whatever school you're interested in, you need to look at that particular school's website, find out when they want that FAFSA completed, because they are trying to give their money away, and they need to know who should I give it to. And every school has their own deadlines, including the Pennsylvania grant form. We have deadlines. So a student needs to get a calendar, go down to the dollar store, get one, write down all the deadlines, and meet those deadlines for any forms the schools are completing. They'll apply to their schools in the fall, November, December. Students are, in high school are applying. They're getting those acceptance letters, and sometimes you're right. They need to commit, or they're not sure, am I going to be able to afford it? So what we recommend is always have a plan B, because you won't get the financial aid award letter until the spring. But every school has a net price calculator on their financial aid page. It is a law that they have that, so that a student can actually go out there and get an estimate of what the bottom line might be, so they could make some educated choices on what my family can afford. We also encourage them to research their education or their career choice, and we give them educationplanner.org on that. And when you go out there and research your career choice, you'll know what your average national starting salary is, and that allows them to make some educated choices on what to pay for college.
Right, because you look at, and there's been lots of conversations on this, and people saying obviously they're supporters of higher education, but to come out, make a certain salary range, but to come out with this type of debt that well exceeds what that starting salary and probably average salary for that career is going to be, don't always match up.
Right.
So to really be realistic on your pay scale,
right,
and what to pay this back as well. So part of the conversation on student debt and taking that on and how much that's going to cost you once you leave school. Is that something that PHEAA can help with as well, like in those conversations, like you're saying? Is there information in the books and things talking about that?
We do. We have, again, the educationplanner.org, and within that is something called My Smart Borrowing. And the My Smart Borrowing piece will allow the student to go out there and say, I want to follow this career path. And then we go out to ONET, which is the National Database of Careers by the Labor Board of Statistics, and it grabs, here's what your national or your average starting salary will be if you follow this career path. And now I'm thinking about going to this school, and here's how much my family can afford to put into it, or things of that nature. And it gives them a rough estimate of, here's the balance you're going to need. And so we encourage students not to go into debt more than they can take on once they graduate, because that's when you're right, they get into trouble. And I always say to students, you're buying an education, not a school. If you can't afford that school, you can find an affordable choice. The goal is to get your education so you can get a better job, not necessarily to go to the most expensive school you can find.
Right, right, and the ranges of schools can be so great. And now I know sometimes community colleges are becoming an option for 2 years and offering a great education, and then moving over to the 4-year degree, as well as technical schools. And there's the choices for parents and for students to really get a good fit on their careers. And I think that's what's important too, to know that PHEAA does a lot of that type of service and help, for students and families. And I like your point about you can never start too early. So is there anything else that you think that a family should really know as they're going through this process? What if they have more than one student in college at a time? It's tough on families because it is so expensive, and that happens often. Is there any recommendations for you on that?
Well, the FAFSA takes that into an account. So when you're completing the FAFSA, it does ask about your household, and if you have more than one child in school at the same time, then the numbers that you're putting in, my income, things like that, are divided by the number of students you have in school. So it's trying to give you additional aid when you do have duplicate children in school, right? And saving, you always want to save, and looking for the scholarships and being eligible for grants, which is free money. Right. So it's just weighing it all out.
And I guess I should ask quickly, we only have a couple minutes, the 529 plans and that type of help and that playing in, that goes on the forms as well?
Sure. A 529 is considered a parent asset, so of course it always helps to save. Anything you don't have to borrow, and so even if you may not get some free aid based on how much money you have saved, it's a good thing, because now you're ahead of the game. Your student doesn't have to be in debt maybe their first or second year and then take the loans in the third or fourth because you bothered to save. So saving money is always a good thing, even if it affects your aid a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And career placement from schools, do you have any quick guidelines? And we're taking off the finances a little bit, but I always talk about looking at schools and looking at their career placement percentages for their career. So once you decide you want to be a nurse, or you want to be an educator or a doctor, looking at the career placement numbers of that university and what's their percentage of placement into a career.
Correct.
Those good numbers to look at, right?
It is, and also many schools have great career services department. At the end, they're going to help you write a resume and set up internships and get interviews, and other schools aren't as heavy into that. So if that's important to you, if I'm going to go to that school and invest my time and money, I certainly want to ask that question: how are you helping me get a job at the end? And that might be important to a family in their decision.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you so much. The time frame went very, very fast, and I think there's a lot of pressure on students and families in regards to higher education, and especially the financials with it. But we do have a lot of resources that are in my office as well, and thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Welcome back to the Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Rosemary Brown, and I'm now joined by Paul Garrison, who is the owner of Inksplat 13 Tattoo and Body Piercing in East Stroudsburg. Paul, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm sure the viewers are saying, okay, so why am I meeting with a tattoo artist and an owner of a tattoo and body piercing establishment here in the Poconos? And there has been some media and communications on some of my legislative efforts, but I wanted to inform people of how this came to my attention, first of all. So we're talking about regulating tattoo parlors and tattoo artists in Pennsylvania, which is not the case right now. There is no regulations.
Right.
So give everybody a history of how you first came to me to kind of give my attention to this issue about the lack of regulation.
It all started when I decided to open up my own shop and called the health department and asked about, what they needed from me in order to open up a tattoo shop. And they told me to call the town that I was looking to open a shop in, speak with the zoning officer, and he would help me. And I went to the town, spoke with the zoning officer, and he informed me that there was no laws, no regulation on tattoo parlors, and that the health department wasn't involved, which I didn't feel was right, and he asked me to come speak with you, and me and the zoning officer came over to speak with you, and that all started almost 4 years ago now.
Exactly. And just for some of the records of people watching, the piece of legislation that I had last session to regulate tattoo parlors did pass the House of Representatives.
Yes.
And it ended up in the Senate, and it was not passed through the Senate. So we are reintroducing the legislation this session with a little bit of adjustments to it to clean it up even more so. And we'll be actively looking, hopefully, to pass this through all the way to become into statute, into law. So you did come to me, and I remember saying to you that I couldn't believe that there was no regulation, because when you talk about tattooing, whether you're in favor of tattooing or you're not in favor of tattooing, if you want to get a tattoo or you don't, that's not the case. I think the initiative is here that if you do choose to have a tattoo, that you can be assured that it is done very safely. So talk about real quickly the tattoo process and how it does break the skin, and how so you become compromised.
Yes. When you're tattooing, the needle is penetrating through the dermis and into the epidermis. It's approximately 1.5 layers of skin. And the ink is being injected with the needles, into the skin. So the skin is open, and it's similar to a minor scrape or, scratch, which can get infected, and if it's not cared for properly, if the procedures aren't followed right, you can contaminate a person by not taking care of certain things properly, as far as handling different things at different times, wearing your gloves, protecting yourself and your client as well.
Right, so when you talk about breaking the skin and having a slightly open wound or having a needle, we're talking about, when we say regulate, to have some sort of procedure for sanitary measures to ensure that there is none of this cross-contamination or a chance of infection. And some of those infections that you could possibly get if somebody was not following procedure and not doing what you normally do is what kind of infections?
You're dealing with hepatitis as one of the major ones, AIDS, staph infection, MRSA, which basically staph and MRSA are almost the same.
Right.
And if you have one client that has it and you touch something that you've touched, with a bloody glove, and then turn around and touch it again on your next customer, the potential is that you'll transfer that to them.
Right.
And we get tattooed by our own equipment, so I don't want to see my clients or my artists or myself get sick because of it.
Right, so it's really important that these measures are followed. Now you came to me saying that you do these specific measures although it's not regulated in Pennsylvania law, and that how important you thought it was for the industry and for safety for people. So at Inksplat, you follow these recommendations. You're very thorough about this, and you're pretty passionate about the fact that the regulation is needed there to ensure that people know when they're getting a tattoo that they are covered.
It's definitely needed. I was an emergency medical technician in Jersey, and I was also a firefighter for 7 years on a volunteer squad. And we went through all the training for bloodborne pathogens and cross-contamination, and the only thing that we didn't do was sterilization, which you do with the tattoo shop, and that's a whole different procedure, and that you'd have to follow.
Now you also, in your shop, with minors, and what is the procedure with minors? Because you have a lot of kids that are wanting tattoos and things, but you follow a very strict standard of rules within your establishment.
Yeah, we will not tattoo or pierce anybody under 18 without parental consent, and we will not pierce anybody or tattoo anybody at all under the age of 16. And that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And some areas, they don't even allow anybody from 18 to 16. It's strictly 18 and over.
Right. So you feel pretty strongly about that this is something that you follow.
There's only certain things that we'll do, and it's discretionary against us, and if it's a tattoo that we don't think is appropriate, then we're just going to refuse it and say no. If another shop wants to do it, that's totally up to them.
And I think it's really important. That's why I thought to have you where our local viewers could watch on where this legislation originated from, that it came from someone who actually has that kind of a business. And it's very unusual for, especially my position, for an industry or a business to say, I want regulation, because usually it's, we're over-regulating, there's too much. And so when you first came to me and we were looking at this proposal, I remember being shocked that, with my antibiotic background in pharmaceuticals, that there was no regulation.
Right.
And then it was unusual for me to have a business saying, I want the regulation. And I think the point is, like you said, we already said, safety and for the reputation of what you do as being an artist as well. But talk about some of the things that are happening behind the scenes when people are getting tattoos, not in an establishment such as yours, or once we even do regulate the establishments, if they're getting tattoos not in those type of environments, what are some things that are happening?
Most of the people that are tattooing outside of a shop, they don't have the sterilization equipment. They don't know the proper procedures for sterilization. There's a lot of variables on it as far as that goes. That's really, they're not trained in bloodborne pathogens. They don't know the proper way to even take off a pair of gloves. And it's, how can I put it? It's unsanitary in a lot of ways, because everything that we have in the shop can be wiped down with maticide or some sort of antimicrobial wipe to clean it and sterilize it. And a lot of people will be tattooing on cloth chairs. It's getting blood on it, it's getting ink on it. And anytime that the ink drops, even a droplet of ink hits something that's going to absorb, it's going to soak in, and it's a potential of possibly transferring a disease to somebody. It's everything that we do is off of stainless steel surfaces, and the floors are cleaned and sanitized, and countertops, in the clean room and that. And there's a lot. It's not just, I can order tattoo equipment online and tattoo somebody in my house.
Well, and that's another thing that is happening because it's so easily accessible. The online products, the online ink, everything. So you're having a lot of this, a friend giving a friend a tattoo,
Right.
and you're having, I know the Dermatology Association had sent me a letter of support for the legislation because of, skin infections and things that have happened from this type. And there's also the quality of the dyes and how, they're not really regulated. So there's different dyes as well,
Yeah,
right?
the different tattoo inks and pigments, they vary, and there's different companies. There's a lot of stuff coming off the internet from overseas that is really just, it's garbage, it's not regulated, and it's bad. And I've seen a couple cases around here where, people had used an inferior ink, and, it was somebody tattooing out of their home, and the person came to me and looked at it, and I told him, I said, I don't even want to touch it. I said, you got to go to the hospital and get that checked out because it was infected. And it's not always the ink, it's also the person too. If they don't care for the tattoo properly, it could cause more problems too.
Right.
So.
Well, and it's a really interesting business, and between the artist component of it, which I've learned more and more as I've met with different tattoo artists, of the art form and the creativity, and having them also be somewhat regulated with apprenticeships.
Yep.
And having then the tattoo parlor, become, and I think the stats are pretty high now as far as the amount of people getting tattoos, so that's also why it's becoming an
It's
issue.
become a lot more popular since the celebrities and sports figures and everybody have been getting heavily tattooed.
Right.
Now it's a little more acceptable in society.
Right. Well, and we're getting a little bit towards the end of the section here, but I wanted to ask you, if you had something to say to parents watching this, whether they are fans of having a tattoo or not, if they have a child that wants to get a tattoo, or anybody they know that wants it, what is your advice to them as far as saying, this is how you pick a place where you go for a tattoo, and make sure you ask these questions, and as we discussed a little bit, but give your professional advice from Inksplat and from you on.
No matter what shop you go into, look around, make sure the shop is clean, look at the artists, look at their portfolios, look and see how they do things when they're setting up and you're getting ready to get tattooed. Make sure everything's taken out of clean packages, that's, fresh, new stuff, not, something being reused. If you walk in and you see stuff already set up, ask them to change it. You want to see it come out of the package and see that it was sterilized and it's clean. Because it's basically your life, and you could
And make sure nothing's happening. Make sure they're not doing it in their garage, and they're not doing it at a friend's house, and they're not doing. Right.
That's the proper way of doing it.
Right.
There's really not much more you can say about it, other than be safe with it.
Well, and hopefully, thanks to you to bringing this to my attention, and I think bringing it to a lot of the legislators' attention. I said to you before the show, a lot of legislators are very unaware that this was the case. I think it's just assumed that there are some health standards and sanitary standards in place. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. And I believe that this legislation hopefully will move forward again this session, and we'll hopefully have it become a law. But I thank you, and that's pretty much it. It goes very fast, our segment. And if you have any questions regarding this show or any other state-related matter, please feel free to contact my office. Again, I'm State Representative Rosemary Brown, and thank you for joining the Legislative Report.